प्रसार भारती अभिलेखागार की प्रस्तुति सदाबहार सुनहरे दौर का अनमोल खजाना।
We had all the stories from Alif Laila, Arabian Nights, and the mythology, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Nautankies. You see, we didn't have this kind of today. We have this communal rift. That time, the culture was very composite.
Were you afraid of anything when you were young?
No, never. I've never been afraid of anything, except lizards. And this is Gagan Nadi. This is Nehtaur's own stream. Its twin stream, Malin Nadi, is very important in Indian literature and mythology. Malin's banks are the locale of Kalidas's Shakuntala Natak. This is the grave of our Sufi ancestor, Mir Hasan Tirmizi. He came here in the 15th century. And he was given lands by the Lodhi kings. One of his sons rose to be a commander of 4,000 horse, which was a lot of horses. Nehtaur was later included in Akbar's crown lands. This is the tomb of one of the Mughal grandees. I grew up in the twilight of the Raj, that is in the 1930s and 40s. A lot of things were happening at that time. The nationalist movement, the new literary movements. I imbibed a lot of all that. Old houses with big gardens, huge rooms. It was very East India Company atmosphere. But then you see, we had two sides of our life. One side was as colonial British. The other side was when we went home to Nehtaur, and it was very feudal. This house belongs to my great uncle. It contains a lot of childhood memories for me. We shall see as we go along. This is the dairy which leads to the inner apartments. My grandfather's palki used to be kept here. Most of my great uncle's descendants have gone to other lands. Fortunately, some of them are still here. They live in India, and they come here off and on to continue the old traditions.
नाज़मा को बुला लो, उसकी सास को बुला लो, बुआ.
Walking around.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम. हज़रत आदम अलैहिस्सलाम, हज़रत रिसालत पना मोहम्मद रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, मोहम्मद बिन अब्दुल्ला बिन हाशिम, हाशिम बिन अब्दुल मुनाफ का पोता.
Now Ahmad Hasan is the last of our family Bhats. They used to recite the genealogy in a very traditional manner at the time of the weddings of the sons of this family.
बस भैया
साथ में कुछ चलता होगा कोई आदमी अहमद के साथ. अहमद
गांव के हो जाते थे मुखिया.
हाँ ये सही है, गांव वाले होते हैं.
Every child makes up things in whichever house lives, whether it's a house, a small house, or a palace. or a hut, every child has a little world of its own, which he or she inhabits and creates, and then he grows out of it. Sometimes he keeps it in his mind and would like to go back to it in times of stress. I've written a lot of the fairyland in me, fairyland in my imagination, yes. And most people do, but they like to put it away in some corner. My cousin, who made us believe that if we were good, the fairy will come and give us a chocolate. So we believed in it. I believed in it. I was quite naive. Even now I'm quite foolish. I mean, at that time somebody told me that my head was full of a straw. So if somebody asked me, what is your head full of? I used to say straw. You know, that sort of thing. I mean, I was not precautious. I was just a normal, intelligent child. Like Charles Lamb, so might we talk of the old familiar faces, how some they have died and some they have left. All are gone, the old familiar faces. Well, we had a very emancipated family, and it was known for its highly educated women long before independence. In our family, girls were as important as boys. It never occurred to us that there could be any discrimination. It was a very enlightened family. My father and my uncles, they were all great believers in the education of women. My aunts were good poets. They wrote in Persian and Urdu both. My cousins were good poets. So poetry was part of our culture. And we were also interested in music, classical music. So it was a very vibrant kind of family. And this is my mother's camera. She became an amateur photographer in the early years of the century, even before she was married. She had her own dark room. My mother was a very remarkable person. Before her marriage, she was editing a very well-known children's weekly called Phool, Urdu weekly. And she wrote books. She became a novelist at the age of 18 or 19. She was very independent. My father was very mild, very gentle. He was a scholar. He was a scholar of Turkish and Persian and so on, and a great traveler, going to Turkey and Europe and here and there. And my family was very much exposed to the outside world. The people were sitting here, they were, I mean, I don't know, I mean, what happens in the drawing room? They sat and they chatted and they discussed poetry, Urdu poetry, fond of musharas. Children had their own world. And they had tremendous respect for their elders. But the elders were not forbidding. They were very friendly. But the children were not disrespectful. That was part of the old culture.
You weren't kept out of an adult world in some ways.
Out of?
For instance, when the elders were discussing poetry or politics, were you...
No, why should we be out? If we were interested, we would hang around or we'll ask questions. We were encouraged to ask questions. You see, it all came by itself. It all came out of the culture itself. So it was not, and another very interesting thing is that my aunts who belonged to the first generation, I never heard them discussing jewelry or ornaments or dowries. You see, I mean, they were very well off, but it was not a consumerist culture. That is the main difference. It was not a culture given to ostentation. Ostentation or display of wealth was considered vulgar. So the difference that I find today and that time was that today people talk of money and they display it. that was a time when everything was subdued, and it was considered bad manners to talk, flaunt your wealth or talk about it. So there's a difference. This table is another relic of the past. It is made of one piece of wood. It's rather rare.
My grandfather was really like a king here, a real feudal. And he used to organize things in a real massive scale. Jhulas and picnics and Meena Bazaar, because all the ladies of the mohalla used to bring things, and tea stalls, and girls are singing, mirasans used to be here. And my mother, being the bahu, they used to, malaएं, gajre, बूंदे जा रहे हैं. It was really like a dream house here. बहुत प्यारा था.
दरिया घेर आई गोरिया वो कैसे खेलन जाइयो सावन माँ का जरिया दरिया घेर आई गोरिया वो जब तू चलिए नाचत गावत लच लच अपनी कमर लचकावत जब तू चलिए नाचत गावत लच लच अपनी कमर लचकावत गुंडा घेर लाया गोरी डगरिया दरिया घेर आई गोरिया वो कैसे खेलन जाइयो सावन कजरिया दरिया घेर आई गोरिया वो कैसे खेलन जाइयो सावन माँ कजरिया दरिया घेर आई गोरिया वो जब तू चलिए नाचत गावत लच लच अपनी कमर लचकावत जब तू चलिए नाचत गावत लच लच अपनी कमर लचकावत गुंडा घेर लाया गोरी डगरिया दरिया घेर आई गोरिया.
When I came to Nehtaur, I was probably 13 years old for the first time. When I came over here, and now when I look back, I feel it, I recognize it as some sort of a Gothic mansion, a huge mansion. It was pitch dark when we entered here. Bats were literally flinging it up.
Dracula's.
But it was very eerie, and I think that eeriness, I still cherish that eeriness. I think the stories are the best way of communicating and of telling me exactly what Anikhala's childhood was all about. Since she belongs to one generation and I belong to the third, she belongs to the first and I belong to the third generation. So obviously, without the stories, it would have been very difficult to empathize what her childhood was like. So, in fact, Anikhala always talks about her childhood, which she considers a dream. It was a dream childhood. We all have all our childhoods. My childhood, I consider my childhood to be a dream childhood, but yet it was different from her childhood.
Well, I think it was a positive world because, as I said earlier, it was a world free of anxieties for us. At that time, our parents must be having their own anxieties, but for us, naturally, for a child doesn't have the anxiety of earning a livelihood, doesn't have the anxiety about what's happening in the world situation, wars. It's a cozy, rosy world where every child has that world. And we had that world, it was more, I think, cozier, because the times were less complicated. People didn't suffer from nervous breakdowns. They didn't. We never heard of people being corruption, inflation, and this kind of thing. All the things that you hear, dishonesty in politics. That at that time, politics was national movement, the struggle against the British. It was a time of roses as well as struggle and great expectations.
What is the first thing?
I remember the first thing. I'm sitting on a table in a white frilled frock, wearing a white frilled frock. And I was known to be a chatterbox, even when I was very young. So if somebody asked me, what is your name? So I said, Annie Tota. And my second memory, earliest, is of going to the Andamans on board the ship in the Andaman Islands. Very vague. It was a school which prepared students for Banaras University. It was a private school. And I've talked of my old teacher, Prithvi Singh Srivastava. He was who had opened the school. He was an old world caste. And we were about 40 girls there. And he prepared us for high school, at Banaras High School of Banaras University. For that I had taken music instead of maths, because I couldn't do maths. And we learned classical music, sitar and vocal. And that was a lovely place. I used to sit under the trees and we had this lovely house in Dehradun, Ashiana. My father called it Ashiana. It was a lovely bungalow. I don't stop writing about it. It had a lovely lychee orchard, and I used to sit under the lychee trees and I used to write little books for my dolls. I had opened a school for them. Like I had a circus for them, I had opened a school for them. And I used to do all these things. And my great friend was my Mali's daughter. We used to be spend the afternoon in the garden. Passage of time in the I mean, life is not a textbook. It was lived by interaction of elders with youngsters and with other people of your own age, other communities. We never thought in terms of communities or religions. We thought of people as friends or as human beings. That's all. Now that is the big difference today. That when we think of somebody, we first think, oh, so and so is. We first make a reference in our mind, a framework. So and so is this region or this religion or this culture. Or we don't think of a person as a human being. This is the difference today. And I think that's where we have failed. And that was the basis of all culture, the core values that were taught. Yes. And they were not taught, they sat down and held a class of the children. It was in their day-to-day life. We could see how they behaved with one another and how they behaved with their friends. I mean, and in those days the friendships had no motives. The friendships were totally selfless. They were just friendship for friendship's sake. And I have inherited my father's and my mother's friends' children as my friends. And we treat one another as cousins, not as friends. It's that kind of relationship. You see? And and those friendships were not, they were not selfish. Today when we make friendships, we always think, what do we get out of it? Is there going to be some kind of profit, some way we'll benefit by this friendship? So that's the difference. We had gramophone records going back to Janki Bai. My name is Janki Bai, Allahabad, and I think one gramophone is still here in this house. And then the time I grew up, the nostalgia we have, all of us have, is for new theatres. And I still love Pahadi Sanyal, Pankaj Malik, Kanan Devi. We had all those records, and then the radio came. And I became a broadcaster at a very young age. I used to broadcast in the children's programming All India Radio Lucknow. We were traveling by car, by steamer, by river steamers, by steamship, by motor car, by train. We were traveling all the time. I remember I have very vague recollection of Baghdad, Port Blair, and of course Bombay, Calcutta. Very vague recollection. I think I saw my first cinema in Missouri, Achutkatta. And I loved circus. I used to go to the circus. Every time there was a circus in town, I used to go and see. In fact, I once told my mother I want to join the circus at that time. And so then I made a little circus of my own dolls. Because when I was not allowed to join the circus, I made a circus of my own dolls. And I became the ringmaster. And the most some of the most extraordinary people of our childhood. One was this Ustad Yusuf Khan of Rampur. He was from Rampur Darbar. He was a star player, and he had been engaged to. He came and stayed in our house in Ghazipur as the resident Ustad, and he used to teach my mother. I was very small, but I remember he used to have these pointed mustaches and he was very popular. Oh, he used to tell such stories, absolute waffle. Real old world characters straight out of some 19th century novel. एक बार हम हमारी कज़न हमारे वालिद जा रहे थे कचहरी, तो पहले ज़माने की गाड़ी थी, तो फिर पीछे लगेज कैरियर हुआ करता था बाहर, getting out. So my cousin Acho and myself, we climbed over it, and we sat down, and the car started. The car came out on the road. Then the driver saw in the front mirror 2 black heads. Then some passerby said, "Arey Baba log piche baithe hain, Baba log gir jayenge, Baba log gir jayenge." The car was stopped. But then you see, my father didn't scold us. He said, he very gently said, "You shouldn't do these things, which can hurt you, which can injure you. You shouldn't do this." That's all. That was one thing in that generation. They were very gentle with one another, and they were very gentle with the children. There was a lot of protocol. The elder brother and the younger brother, they will observe a lot of protocol. My father and his younger brothers will have this sense that who's older and who's younger. Now that kind of thing is not there today. Then the war, First World War, the Second World War began. Of course, there was this big impact, and you could see the changes in society. I was then growing up. I was still wearing frocks. I was still a schoolgirl. And for us, it only affected to the extent, the war affected us to the extent that there was petrol rationing. And many of our parents, friends, sons joined the British Indian Army. So, and things became more, and there was a certain modernization. A certain modernization came in society. A certain something which was not there before 1939. It came. I remember distinctly. We were in Raebareli, where my uncle was a civil surgeon, and my father and my uncle had gone to the club, district club, and we were all sitting on the huge big lawn over there at night. It was, I think, the 3rd of September, 1939, and the headlight came. I distinctly remember the headlight came on the of the car came on the lawn, and then my father and my uncle came down, and my mother and my aunt, they were sitting on the lawn, and they said, war has broken out. So that made a lot of changes in our surroundings. There was more verb, and from that time, the beginnings of corruption could be seen. Big money, contractors, a certain cheapness came in the society. Commercialism. I think it was the beginning of commercialism at that time. My story, The Magic Mountain, Jugnuo ki Duniya in Urdu, is about this background. This photograph is part of the background of this story. When the annual family photograph was taken, we were hauled back from the orchard while the photographer dipped his head in and out of the black cloth which covered his camera on the tripod. We still had unripe peaches in our mouths when the photographer said, "Ready?" When we were on our way, this house is still there, but it is the usual sort of bungalow in the mountains. However, you must believe me when I tell you that in this colorless world of ours, there was once a time when a fairy from the Caucasus Mountains used to visit this house in Almora by the light of the fireflies. And you must also know that childhood vanishes like the light of the fireflies, as though we had never been young and innocent once.